What's up everybody, Liam Clisham here for another eye-popping Redshift walkthrough, so let's go ahead and dive in. Hey everybody, Liam Clisham here for an exciting Redshift tutorial. I'm going to be talking to you about Redshift in Cinema 4D and how to get started. It's officially out of the alpha, well unofficially, but officially because they said at Brograph that at the end of August it was going to be out of alpha. So I'm going to start making some tutorials for it. You guys deserve it, so there's too much demand to not do it. So what I've got here is a cool little toy taxi that I got off of Turbo Squid, and I've broken it down and connected some objects, made it a little bit smoother just to make the workflow easier. But let's go ahead and take a look at my layout so you can follow along a little bit easier. So the way I have it set up is, one, I'm on an ultra wide monitor, so if the aspect ratio seems a little weird, I apologize. That's just because of how big my monitor is, but hopefully it converts nicely. So up here we have the objects panel. Here's our taxi. I'm going to get rid of this dome light to begin with. And then we have the exterior body, which has trunk, hood, all that information in there. The tires for the front and the rear. Some interior stuff like the rear view mirror and the steering wheel, engine bed, and the chassis. I think I'm going to mostly focus on the exterior of the car, and if there's enough time, I'm going to try and keep this around 30 minutes. Then I will continue through the whole thing. But so now that you know my layout a little bit, we've got objects, we've got layers here. I've put all the original materials for C4D in here, and I'm going to show you how to convert them, and we'll place them under the Redshift menu to make our organization a little bit easier. Over here I've got two attribute panels. Oftentimes I'll lock one and jump into another one and copy and paste things. That's just how I like it. Down here I keep all my IPR windows. What IPR stands for is Interactive Preview Viewer or Region or Renderer. So like Live Viewer, that's for Octane. Here's Redshift, and here's Arnold. I usually hop between Arnold or Redshift depending on what I'm working for, if I need to send a project out to a farm. Now that Pixel Plow has Redshift there too, life is just phenomenal. So I can kind of choose between my two favorite renderers. I am biased, no pun intended. I have fallen in love with Arnold and Redshift. I was a huge Octane user, so if you guys have any questions about how to make the leap from Octane to Redshift or Octane to Arnold, definitely leave them in the comments and I can help you guys with that too. So I'm going to just keep this IPR here for Redshift open, and you'll see it's already trying to process. Let me stop that. So some cool things that link to the Redshift engine and regular standard and physical are, it takes some cues from just normal Redshift, or sorry, normal Cinema 4D, in that it will use the default light for your rendering. So let's go ahead and reset my settings a little bit. So in here, if we go to standard, and I just went into options and turned my default light on, if you've never known that's there, if you hit Control R and get a quick little render going, it's using light from the scene that Cinema 4D has dictated through this default light. And you can change that, move it all around, and have a default light. However, when it comes to render time, if you forget to turn that off, sometimes it can affect the way your final render comes together. So one of the first things I always do, whether it's standard, physical, anything, is make sure all my lights and colors are the way I'm going to want them. So I don't want the default light affecting anything. So under standard, I always turn it off. So I'm going to go in here, and Redshift, it has one of the same options. So here are all the tabs. If we go all the way to integration, it's integrated the default light, and I don't want that. So I'm going to uncheck that. That way, when I hit play, you'll see it's dark, and this taxi light over here and the lights here for the headlights have illumination on them, so it's processing the light on there. That's where we're getting that light from. Otherwise, the scene's completely dark. So we'll add in our own lights in just a few minutes after I go through these settings. So to start, let me reset this. It usually starts at 1024 and has this checkbox on. So what that means, and you know what, just to give you guys something to look at, I will keep this on for the time being. So what that means is in the IPR over here, you'll see progressive rendering. And what it's trying to do is make your IPR look the best it can up to 1024 passes. You can change it down to 32, and the IPR will run until it gets to 32 passes. The problem with that is it can give false hopes. So when you're looking at this, like, man, that looks damn good. But then when you render out your final scene, it doesn't look great because you haven't actually optimized your scene. You're kind of just faking it a little bit and making it the best it can look. And then upon render time, it's actually not what you're expecting. So just like turning off the light, I go in and I turn this off as well. So for a simple toy like this, 1024 passes or samples, people call it different things, we'll just call it passes, is a lot. So what it's saying is take 1024 samples of this scene and process it and make it look as best as you can with that many passes. People often get caught up in this and just ramping up the number. So 1024 or 10,000 samples. You don't need all that. Oftentimes, a lot of the noise that you get comes from bad lighting or not giving your lighting enough samples. So we can turn this down, and I'm going to turn it down to 32 for the time being and just leave it at that. And I'll show you how adding samples to your lights makes a huge difference without even touching this number. 32 and 64, generally where I keep it at, it makes the IPR really fast, makes your production time and render time is really fast. And if you need more samples because you have really complex glass and scenes like that, then you can come back in here and mess with that and start cranking up numbers. So for unified sampling, it's kind of the same thing. You're telling Redshift only do a minimum of 4 samples. So when it's calculating, it's going to focus on areas that aren't so noisy and only put 4 samples in that area. And then the noisier areas, that's the sample max. So it's going to do 16 samples maximum in those areas. There's adaptive rendering settings that you can do too, which kind of is like a median in between the two. So it'll try and keep your render times a little bit better. It also adapt to how noisy things are. So if it's really noisy in one area, if you make this down to like 0.001, then it'll really focus on those super noisy areas, and then it adapts to the other areas that aren't so noisy and does less samples. Usually you can leave this at default. If you're having a lot of trouble with your times, you can come in here and start to mess with that a little bit. If you go up to 1, then it's basically saying most things can pass through, and you're going to have even more samples to take care of the noise. So it seems about 0.01, 0.001, somewhere in between those two is really where you should keep your adaptive error threshold. Other stuff you've got in here are sample filtering, overrides, motion blur. These are all advanced topics that I don't really want to cover. I just want to get you guys started so you can feel comfortable inside Redshift. I know a lot of people are really interested in it. They start working with it. They start working with the Uber shader, and then they get to a point where they want to add a texture in or noise or various things, and then they have to go into the graph editor and they get scared, and so they turn it off or they hop into Octane or Arnold or wherever. And that shouldn't be the case. I want you guys to feel really comfortable. So that's it for the basics. If you want to do render passes here for Nuke or Fusion compositing or even in After Effects, this is where you can start to do some of that. Really nitpicky optimization controls in here. Global illumination, I'll talk about that as we start to add our materials in and how to best optimize for getting the best looking picture with global illumination. Some memory management stuff, photon maps, subsurface scattering, a lot of different stuff. One of the cool things that Redshift has is it will automatically manage your memory in your GPU. So it is considered an out-of-core GPU. So if you run out of VRAM on your card, it'll start to manage the memory through writing it to a cache or using your CPU a little bit more and optimizing your cards so you're not crashing and you're not burning, kind of like when you have giant scenes in Octane and then you get stuck and you need to find ways to optimize. This helps do that for you. And then the integration again. So again, to cover this, I'm going to leave it at 32 passes. We'll leave these min and max the same, leave everything the same in here, and we'll start putting stuff together. So to start, I'm going to throw in a light. And in my scene, I keep all my Redshift options here, my Arnold options here, a shader graph is here for both Arnold and Redshift. If you don't have your scene set up like that, you can go into the Redshift menu, click on this little groove here, and it will pop it off, and you can lock it wherever you want. So I like to keep mine locked down there, and that's where I can get my light menu really fast and cameras. And I'm going to throw in a dome light, and you'll see it automatically goes to white. It's just a full dome of white light, and I don't want that. I want something nice and well thought out, so I'm going to use the HDRI link from Grayscale Gorilla. Just pull in a nice HDRI. This is from their Pro Metals pack. Put that there and link it up. If you want to learn how to do this, go over to Grayscale Gorilla, follow their videos. They have some really nice lessons on using their HDRI packs. And I want a nice clean plate for the background, so I'm going to turn this around there. And you'll see that we've got a pretty nice, well-lit scene. It may be worth spinning this a little bit. Let's try a little 90-degree turn. There we go. A little bit more focus of light over here. But at the moment, you can see it's still a little bit noisy, and it's processing just the Cinema 4D textures that came with this model. So let's take a look at just the body texture to figure out how we can start converting from a C4D standard material into a Redshift material. So if I double click on this, bring up our material editor, this was designed in R9 or 10, I believe is what it said when I opened it. So there aren't a lot of the new cool stuff that comes standard in Cinema 4D R18 and R19, especially with the new PBR workflow stuff. So how some of these are relating probably isn't as optimized as it could be for more contemporary versions of Cinema 4D. So we'll keep that in consideration. But the way this person has set it up is under the color settings. Down here for the texture, we've got an image. And wrong button, there we go. I'm going to go into my models area on here, which is Fun Taxi right there. We've got our textures. So we've got reflectance right there. This is Taxi Body Diffuse. TS is Taxi Sign Diffuse, and TSS is Taxi Sign. It's illumination. I'm not sure why they labeled it S. Maybe saturation level for that area there for when it's set up in the illumination channel. That's the modeler's choice to name it like that. I would call it TSI for illumination. So we're gonna be using these materials and bringing them in to Redshift in just a little bit. But so you can see, grab that, it replaces it, and it stays the same. Down in reflectance, they actually don't even have the reflectance piped into here. They have it running through environment because that's how you used to do stuff like that. So we're gonna mostly ignore this and focus on color, and then reflectance and stuff I will focus on again inside the Redshift materials themselves. So here we've got our body, and let's start there for Redshift. So for Redshift, you can't just double tap. You actually have to go into the Create, Redshift, Materials, and you'll see there's a bunch. We're just going to focus on the standard material, but they have architectural materials, car paint, which has cool like metal flakes in it, C4D shader. So if you want to start converting C4D shaders into Redshift shaders without fully recreating, I personally don't think it runs as well, and I've run into crashes that way, so I really like to remake my materials. Then down here we've got sprites, which there's a video floating around on YouTube which uses an image on a plane, and those planes turn into a sprite, so it's kind of like having proxies. For those of you who are more advanced, meaning that you can have instances of things or proxies of things, and it doesn't take up a lot of memory, and it still looks like a 3D object. It's really good for particle type stuff, like if you want to have leaves blowing through the air. Got a subsurface scattering for like skin, an actual particle, and then volumes if you want to do VDBs and smoke and all that. Anyway, so material, and we're gonna put this on our Redshift layer, put it right in there, and we're gonna call this taxi body. I like to keep things as organized as possible. So now that we've got the taxi body, we're gonna focus on this here, the exterior body, and what we can do is see that this one is called body. We'll go into materials, and right here is our body material. And I'm gonna go ahead and go to function, if it stays up, function, and then select texture tags and objects. And what it's gonna do is find all those in the scene and select them for you, and then you can very quickly drop them right here in the attributes under material, and it'll update. And now we've got an ugly gray car. What do we do? Well, let's double tap on this like you will with another material, and we can start messing with the colors. So it's kind of an orange taxi. We'll make it orange. All right, starting to look like our taxi, but it's not. Where are our numbers and stuff? And this is where people start to get really confused and worried about using nodes in Redshift. And I promise you we can do it just by adding one node, because Redshift has already taken care of the base nodes that you need. So the way that we can get there, if you don't have yours set up like mine, is go into your material, hit edit with shader graph, and it will pop this up like it does with the material editor, but I've got mine locked down here, so it brought it up here. And what we're gonna do is come down here, and you'll see these settings are the exact same as the material editor. So if I click here and go into base properties, you get pretty much the material editor right there. Bring that up here. So there's material editor, output, unfold, and it's all the same. So this quote-unquote Uber shader is really just an isolation of this node right there, so you don't have to go in the into the graph editor. But you do want to use your textures, so you do need to go into graph editor, and this is where things get really fun and interesting, and being able to use Redshift in a more productive manner. Since we're just focusing on the basics of materials, I'm not going to get into all that, but you can have instances of materials, you can do math and adjust your levels and contrast and start mixing and matching things and get really cool looking materials without having to go into Substance Designer or Painter or 3D Coat and all that. You can do a lot of it right here. So what I'm going to do is, it's not called an image, it's called a texture. So we do a search for texture, and this is the node that we want. We're going to drag it into here, and we'll automatically get a pop-up for this folder that we were just in. Since we're working on the body, we're going to do TBD for taxi body diffuse, and I'm going to rename this to taxi body diffuse. And right on this node, if you've ever used Espresso before, you'll notice it's very similar. We have the out color, and I'm going to bring it into our Redshift material node. And we're going to get a drop down with all the options that we get in here. But we're going to pipe this out color into the diffuse color. So it then starts using the texture as the color. And we automatically get all of our stuff back. And now it feels like we're making progress and it's not overwhelming. And all we did was just add in one node. And that's pretty much what we're going to do throughout, except for the exception of this sign. And I'll show you, we're going to have to use two nodes. Not a big deal. It's just two texture nodes, and we pipe them in the exact same way. So while we're talking about that, why don't I go ahead and show you how we're going to do that. So I'm going to hold Control on my keyboard and drag to make a copy of taxi body. That way we keep one of the texture nodes in there, and I'm going to call this taxi sign. And you'll see it's got all of this in here. And it even has the new node brought in here. So you don't have to keep going back and forth to the graph editor and changing it out in there. Once you connect a node, it adds it into the material editor, which makes it really nice. It's just a one-time quote unquote hassle to go into the graph editor and connect your texture node. So for the sign, I said we're going to need 2. So go in here and we've got this taxi body diffuse, but what we really need now is taxi sign diffuse. And we're going to go into the general area and set our path to TSD for taxi sign diffuse. And we can see the signs right there. And we'll go ahead and replace it like that. But we don't have any illumination, and that kind of sucks, unless you know it's a taxi that's not working, so they want to go home and go to sleep, then that doesn't suck for them, but we want the light on. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy this node and select it again and rename it, and we're going to call this taxi sign ILL and illum. Just make it nice and sweet. We're going to go to our path and get this right there. That's an alpha for the illumination. And under here, under overall, there's an emission or illumination. So emission means it's emitting light. We're going to pipe the color into the emission color. So when I bring it up here, we get the green saying, all right, you're go ahead to connect it. Go into overall, emission color. Nothing happens. Well, that's because our emission weight is set to 0, and weight means how much power, essentially. So for messing with this before, I found 2 worked really well, and boom, we've got our light. And so if I go back over here, turn off my dome light, you'll see it's lighting up just like before. And so it's just 2 nodes. And sometimes it's a little bit of trial and error to figure out exactly how to get things to work the way you want. But for me, as a designer and a C4D artist and just a motion designer in general, I love solving problems like this. This is one of the funnest parts of the job. So now we've got that all solved. We know that we have a diffuse texture piped into here, so the sign looks right, and then we have illumination coming out through its emissions in here. And if you want to change it too, we can put a new tint on there. Let's say you want there to be like a soft blue light coming from it. You can see it changed just a little bit to a blue. And if you want it even more, we can make it really blue. But that actually starts to affect the overall tint too. So we're just going to set that back. It's kind of spreading out from the emission onto the actual texture, which we don't want. So we're going to leave it white so it looks normalized. So we've got these 2 textures updated. And I'm going to go through and make sure that everything else is looking good. So we've got taxi body there on the doors. I think that's all we really need to do for the normal body. Yep, chassis doesn't need any of that. So let's take a look at the door. And the way the door is set up in this model is a little bit strange. It actually has some interior options on there too. It wasn't separated out. It's all baked in. So you can look at the door panel right there and see it's got that interior foam, soft faux padding that you would get in a car. We're just going to reset that. So we're going to have to go through these and break these down a little bit. So this one is called interior. This is glass, which must be for the window right there. We've got the mirror attached right there. And we've got black plastic, which must be the black plastic for this. And so that's something that I forgot to talk about in the body is let's talk about making this look more plastic. One of the best things about Redshift and that they've integrated are custom presets. So glass, tinted glass, water, plastic. Because we've already worked on this a little bit, I'm just going to go ahead and put in the number of the IOR, and IOR stands for Index of Refraction. So everything in the world has an index of refraction. Your skin, a light bulb, a camera, a desk, pieces of paper. There's a great site right here as I have my Frame.io open at the same time, but it's called pixelandpoly.com. And they have a bunch of different things, but one of their resources is this index of refraction site where you can look up materials. So I've already done a search for plastic, and I can see that it's 1.46 on the index of refraction scale. So what I'm going to do in here is go 1.46, and that's going to say everything should be computed at that level. So when the light hits it, it should look very similar, if not identical to the way plastic refracts and reflects light. And I'm going to go ahead and just add a few more samples onto that. And you'll see it gets a little cleaned up, and I actually want it a little bit rougher too. So I think maybe like 0.25, quarter of the way of roughness, add that in there. Spread out the light a little bit. Roughness will kind of diffuse the reflection. And up here, we're going to keep our weight the same. And I'm going to add a little bit of reflection or of roughness here too. Might be a little too much. How about 0.125? 1.8. Yep, there we go. Okay. And so now we get a little bit more plastic vibe, but what do we do about that noise before we move on to the doors and everything else? If that's starting to bother you already, the way you can start to do that is bump up your samples in your light. Just like I was saying at the very beginning of the video, a lot of times it's not pushing your render settings, it's pushing the lights. So I've got 64 here. I bet it's going to take something about 256. So I'm going to go down to 32 so you can see how noisy it can get. That looks terrible. So let's go up to 256, and that really cleans it up. And maybe even 512 if you want to get it super smooth. Kind of nitpicking at that. I think 256 is going to handle it well for the time being. We can go in and adjust more in a few minutes. So I've cleaned that up, making it look pretty nice, and now we can go back and focus on the door. So the door interior is where, I'm going to start with the plastic on the mirror because I want to focus on mostly external things, and then we'll do the mirror itself, and then the glass, and then we'll do interior stuff at the end. So this plastic piece, let's go ahead, go into our materials and see if it's anywhere else. So again, function, select texture tags / objects. You'll see there's a lot of plastic. So what we're going to do is go in here, create a new redshift material right there. And it's probably, yeah, I got it associated in here. I must have my regular material selected. There we go. Hopefully from now on it will add it into the right spot. And what we're going to do is call this Taxi Plastic. And to show you how awesome some of the presets are in here, we're going to make this one just using plastic. And when we open this up, you'll see it matches. Now, the one that I found was 1.46. This says 1.49. That's up to you. You can do it either way. For continuity, I'm going to just change it back down to 6. And we want black. So we're going to change this down to black. I don't always like using a pure black, so let's do 15%. And now we've got all these, just selecting one, took it off, so I'm going to select all these again. So function, texture tags, go into our redshift materials and just drop it right there. And you'll notice everywhere the black plastic was got updated. So the mirror here, on the bumper here is now the black plastic. Now the tires have their own, even though it's pretty much the same, and we may just replace that with the same black plastic. But very quickly, we just made all of our plastic convert over in just a couple steps. So let's take a look at this mirror. Mirrors have a lot of reflectance. So when we look in it, we want to be able to see something coming out of there. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new regular material. It's still adding it. Where is it? Under no layer now? Okay, that's fine with me. And we're going to call this Taxi Mirror. So for the mirror, we'll go in here and mirror is right there. Function, select texture tags and objects, and there's the one over there, and I think it even gets the rear view mirror when we do that. Go ahead and drop that in there, and it's already got a little bit of reflection. Awesome, but we can crank this up. So what I'm going to do is pretty much get rid of diffuse. I'm going to leave it at like 0.15. Maybe even like 0.125, just a little bit going on. Tiny little tree like Bob Ross, just a tiny little bit of diffuse, happy little diffuse right there. And then down here in reflection, we're gonna crank this. So I'm gonna make this like 32 since we're gonna be jumping this up, and we're gonna do like a 20 on the IR scale. I'm not gonna look it up, I'm just gonna do it. Oh yeah, nice and clean mirror. They use Windex for sure. And even inside, let's see if it will let me see. I think because of the glass, don't really get to see it. And we don't have a light inside here, so it's coming up dark. But you can see there's a reflection right in there, kind of processing right there. So we'll go back to the exterior so you can really see that. All right, nice clean mirror. Just went to the car wash. Got some Windex, looking all fine. It's going on a date tonight. So, almost done with the exterior of the car. The last thing that we haven't updated is the window. So for glass, I'm gonna do the same thing. Make it nice and simple. Get a material, go in here, we're gonna call this taxi glass, and assign it to our Redshift materials. Let's go ahead and find the glass in here. Here's our glass. Function, select texture tags, and we will throw taxi glass in there. Oh, that doesn't look like glass, no. Well, we've got glass right here. And boom, and you'll see it even starts to warp it around. It makes it look a little too realistic. So I'm gonna do just a happy little diffuse weight right in there. And I'm gonna bring down this reflection to about 0.65. We don't really need that much reflection. I'm gonna bring our samples up to say 32. And what I'm gonna do is add some roughness in here and a little bit in here. That way it kind of disperses the light a little bit. We may even give this guy some tinted windows, just a little bit of blue on there. Let's see how that starts to look. So some tinted windows with some noise. It's looking all right. It's looking a little bit more like a plastic window may look, but it's noisy. So let's do 128. See if that helps refine that noise a little bit. A little. So this is where I noticed when I was messing with this before recording this, is that we will actually probably have to increase our samples a little bit here in the actual samples, in the unified sampling. Try 128 here, see if that helps. Don't think it really does, just a little bit. So that's what I'm gonna do. So under our render settings, we've got 32. I'm gonna leave that the same, but I'm gonna make this 16 and make this 32. See if that helps out a little bit. Something that's really awesome about Redshift is you can see your samples. So I'm gonna turn that on. And most of the black areas in here mean it has enough samples. And then the white areas means it's noisy. And so it's really noisy in those areas. Mostly the reflectance and refraction areas. And in the very beginning, I said there's this advanced area called sampling overrides. What this does is lets you focus on just reflection areas, just refraction areas, ambient occlusion. So I'm gonna see if doing the reflection and scale and maybe doing a multiple of 4 helps that out. A little bit, we'll try with the refraction. So maybe we'll try an 8. There we go. All right, so it's the refraction is really doing it. So I'm gonna turn off the reflection and we'll see how much that helped. And gotta remember to turn this off. So there we go. We've still got some noise, but it's more plastic looking. It's more evenly dispersed. And so now across our windows, it's still kind of distorting it the way glass and plastic should, but it's kind of got this plexiglass toy feel to it now. You can still see the interior, but it's also a little bit more rough and diffused. So, oh, you know what? I'm gonna kind of cheat and change that to 1.49 to what the plastic was in this. I'll get it just a little bit more plastic looking, and it's kind of a happy medium between that 1.46 and 1.5 that glass was, or 1.51, whatever it said. Apparently I need some more coffee. So that's pretty much the whole exterior of the body. The only thing that we haven't worked on are the light bulbs and the grill and stuff out there. So, and the brake light stuff. So it's almost all done. So what are we at for time? So this is about 30 minutes already. I'm gonna go ahead and cut it off here. If you guys like this video, definitely hit the like button, leave comments below, and I will do a follow-up. I'm gonna go ahead and just hit save right now, and we can finish up the whole rest of the body. And while we're just right here, just to make me feel better, I'm gonna make these tires the black plastic, because there's no need for it to be so many different types of plastic. There we go. So a little bit better matching there. And this is probably the same plastic, just silver steel color, and we're almost there. And for rendering, it's the same thing. Let me cover that really quick. We're at 35 minutes. Really quickly, I'll show you how to do a render. And I'm gonna uncheck my save and current frame. That's fine. I've got all that there, and I'm gonna just move my camera a little bit here, and I'm gonna put a disc underneath. Get some little bit of sexy reflection, like my sound effects, and we'll do that there. Put that underneath. There we go, showing up a little bit. If I pull it away, do we get more of the reflection? Nah, it's probably just the way the HDRI is set up. That's all right. Come up a little bit more. That's all right, still looking pretty. So, if you've ever used Cinema 4D before, which I assume you have, because most people at this point of their career, if they're integrating Redshift or Octane or any third-party render engine, you've done this before. Get your settings all set. You can save it with an alpha channel, however you want, multipass settings, blah, blah, blah. And we just hit Shift-R, but it's going to run through Redshift. And look at that. So fast. So you'll notice in the areas that we still have Cinema 4D's materials, it's not as well lit. We've got the nice lighting right there. But if we come in, we'll set this to 100%. Start to take a look around. Got most of this noise cleaned up. We can probably add some more samples to our light to get a little bit smoother in there. But it's kind of got a nice little grain to it too. I like that grain. I like how this is kind of this frosted plexiglass in here. It's just looking pretty fine. If you want to save it as normal, that's all you have to do. You just turn on your save, get your settings however you want. If you want a TIFF or an EXR or whatever, you're all set. Nothing's really different there except if you're doing multipasses, which I can talk about in another video under AOV. That's how you get your multipasses going. All right, guys, this has been Liam Clisham. You can reach out to me at liam@5-31.com or @_531 on Twitter. Please like the video if you like it, or dislike it. That's fine too. You won't hurt my feelings. Leave comments if you have questions, especially if you have been an Octane user for a long time and you want to jump into Redshift. I can show a similar video on making conversions from Octane materials into Redshift ones. If you're a Cycles user, I have Cycles too. I pretty much have messed with everything because I'm psychotic, I guess. All right, guys, thanks so much for your time and stopping by and taking the time to watch this video. I hope I have quelled anyone who's been feeling like, man, Redshift is so hard to get into, when really it's just a couple nodes and you're on your way and it looks so pretty and it's so fast. Also, thanks again for Grayscale Gorilla and their awesome HDRI stuff. They're not a sponsor or anything, but I use their stuff all the time. They've been a big influence on my career. So if you guys are looking for quick HDRI setups, go check out their YouTube channel and give them a visit and throw some money at them, because their HDRI kit and HDRI studio stuff is amazing.